I hear from leaders and friends all the time, like time and time again, how hard it is not to jump into solution mode, not to jump into fix it mode, whether it's someone on your team coming to you with a problem or whether it's a friend, like you're solving a client crisis at work, or a friend comes to you about the latest argument or crazy thing their mother-in-law just did. And it is in our nature to want to fix, to solve, to give our perspective, to give the answers, to give all the advice. And sure, of course, we want to do it to help them. But more often than not, what we miss is that we aren't trying to give solutions and advice because we want to help them, but we often or make them more comfortable or help them through it. We're actually doing it to self-soothe and to make ourselves more comfortable. We want to find solutions or tie a bow on things and situations, not for the other person, but for ourselves. Life's too short for bad coffee or bad leadership. I'm Lindsay Yellin, executive leadership coach, coffee enthusiast, and former ad VP turned believer in leading from a place of possibility. On Unfiltered Leadership, we skip the buzzwords and dig into the messy, human, and powerful side of leadership with real conversations and practical takeaways. Now grab your mug. Let's dive in. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Unfiltered Leadership, to another solo episode with me. I am coming to you today from a pretty foggy, cloudy Half Moon Bay. And to talk about what's in my mug today, I'm so excited to share that I have a new mug. I don't really buy a lot of mugs anymore because I have so many. It is a problem. But this weekend was Pumpkin Festival here in Half Moon Bay. We are all about surfing and all about pumpkins. And there is a massive festival. So many people come, everything pumpkin. And it's also an art fair. So there's tons of artists selling things. But I actually was working there for Rebel, the coffee shop I work at, and we were doing like a coffee pop-up in one of the shops on our main street. So I got to serve people this unbelievable pumpkin cold brew and watch the parade from the windows and all the cute things of a small town doing a festival on pumpkins. And inside the shop was a woman who actually is also a ceramics artist, and she was selling these mugs. And for those that can't see, it's like a 3-tone handleless mug with this little red line down the middle that, like, something about it is so satisfying and beautiful, of like the browns and greens contrasting this red. I fell in love with it. So I'm using it today in honor of Pumpkin Fest, in honor of Half Moon Bay local artists. And I'm sipping some matcha out of it today. So I want to start this episode and getting into the topic I want to, bring to light for all of us with a story. So back in May was when I was really in the thick of my sickness, in my pregnancy, first trimester sickness. And I talk a lot about that in in the first episode, the one with Ronnie Dickerson Stewart. So if you haven't listened to it, I recommend it. It's a really beautiful conversation about how to find yourself when you feel lost from yourself, which was certainly the season I was in. But I was really very sick at that time and didn't get out of bed most days. One of the things that was one of the greatest comforts during that time was my dog Putty. So those of you that don't know me or know, is I have a big fluffy golden retriever. His name is Putty, and he's perfection and so sweet and snuggly. And he's my first baby. And during these days when I couldn't move, and I was just in bed, he was so dedicated to me. He would never leave my side. He was either laying at the bottom of the bed, along my feet, or he was laying next to me with his head on my stomach or chest, asking for a few oyster crackers, or where he'd find himself is posed, I guess, down on the floor at the edge corner of our bed that kind of lined up to where he could look out the door of the bedroom as this like very steady sphinx, because he looks like this lion, and he would just be there kind of like guarding me or being with me, but looking out the door to what might be happening downstairs or if anyone coming. And he would just spend hours and hours, and he would maybe run downstairs to go outside or if someone came over, but he'd run right back up. He hated going out for walks or daycare, and he'd always come back and find me. And he was just like this dependable force. I had other people checking on me. Of course, Carrie was around and my mom and family, but it was different with Putty. And I grew so grateful and to his presence and his loyalty and his care. And like, he couldn't fix anything, right? Of course. But also, he didn't try, not that he could. Just was there with me. So I spent a lot of time during that dark, bedridden period thinking about Putty, his unconditional love in this moment, how grateful I was. And it got me thinking a lot about the power of being with over trying to fix when people are in struggle. And it's a topic that deserves our attention because we are all going through something. I think collectively we're also going through a struggle. And it's very easy for us and comfortable to be in a fix it, band aid, appease, make everybody feel better mode without recognizing the power of being like Putty, of being with. I hear from leaders and friends all the time, like time and time again, how hard it is not to jump into solution mode, not to jump into fix it mode, whether it's someone on your team coming to you with a problem or whether it's a friend, like you're solving a client crisis at work, or a friend comes to you about the latest argument or crazy thing their mother-in-law just did. And it is in our nature to want to fix, to solve, to give our perspective, to give the answers, to give all the advice. And sure, of course, we want to do it to help them. But more often than not, what we miss is that we aren't trying to give solutions and advice because we want to help them, but we often or make them more comfortable or help them through it. We're actually doing it to self-soothe and to make ourselves more comfortable. We want to find solutions or tie a bow on things or on situations, not for the other person, but for ourselves. Because it is so hard to be with someone when they are in struggle or they are in uncertainty. It is a lot of discomfort to have to sit with. And that requires serious capacity and courage. And we don't often have it, or it's hard to access in the moment. And it's so much easier to say, let's solve this. I want to make you feel better. I want to feel valuable. I want to feel better. I don't want to hold on to this discomfort. But honestly, what most of us are craving in those moments of struggle, especially in the raw, like right reactionary moments when we're in it, when we're going to people seeking support, is we're not craving solutions. We're not craving advice. We're not craving perspectives. Of what the other person thinks we should do. We really just want to be less alone in it. And we underestimate that when other people are in struggle, most don't want that advice. They just want to feel heard, right? They just want to feel heard. We want to feel less alone. It takes a lot of compassion and a lot of empathy. So I'm going to share a couple examples. One certainly was, this is not one of the two, but the other one, it was certainly, that was me in my period of sickness. Like, I tried everything, right? I tried all the ginger chews until I couldn't eat ginger because I would make me sick. I tried everything. So when I talked to people and they would try to give more solutions, it was like, it wasn't what was helpful in that moment. But I want to share a couple others. So recently I was talking to a friend and we were in conversation and I was sharing and kind of venting around a tough personal situation. And they were very receptive to it. They were a very empathetic friend. They're one of the few people I'd go to in situations like this. But they did jump to this kind of solution mode of like ideas and things. And I just noticed, because I was thinking about this topic too, I just wanted to be really present to myself and how I was responding, because I was very much still in the thick of this situation. And I felt myself like shutting down in those moments. And I wasn't ready to receive it. It wasn't that their ideas weren't great. It wasn't that I don't value them or that they're maybe the right ones. I couldn't receive it yet. I was still just in the heart. I wasn't in solution mode yet. So it did shut me down in those moments. And it's okay. judge or nor upset with them for it. I just recognized from my own learning that that isn't what people are looking for, always the right answer. So another example, more of a, I guess, somewhat work situation is last month, well, I guess I should say in September, I was at a workshop and a corporate workshop, and a really talented senior leader who I really, really value and appreciate spoke up when we were talking just about actually some of these skills that we're going to talk about today. And he reflected and shared a story back. He goes, yeah, recently, he's like, at work, I am valued and known for my ability to come up with solutions and fix problems. Like, that is one of my greatest values I bring to this job that people come to me for. And recently I was at home with my wife and she was going through something, and she had like stopped me and been like, I don't want to go into solutions. Can you just let me talk about it? Just let me vent. And he reflected on that it was very difficult for him, and he had to play a bit of a different role, and he just had to sit with and be with her and just kind of hold space and connect and ask some questions, and how that was really powerful for her. And that it was he had to tap into a different skill set. And I challenged him in the room. I go, it's amazing that you were able to get to that place and be there with your wife, and that she was able to articulate what she needed, and you were able to, recall that situation. But I do believe the opportunity here is that what you did for your wife, you have the chance, if you were even to do that 10% more with people on your team, with your clients, with your colleagues, that would make such a huge difference in your leadership. Of course, you are valued for your ability to think of these creative solutions and have the answers. That will not go away. But if you're able to build the muscle to know when instead to sit back and be with, instead of lean forward and give the solution right away, wow, that is strong, strong leadership, and start to decipher those differences. So I want to invite you to reflect a little bit on how you respond in moments when people are coming to you in struggle. And I think this can come to life in a lot of different ways. It can be the more emotional type of struggle that I've kind of been reflecting on, but also this is similar for when someone on your team or your child or your partner is coming to you with like, how do I respond to this email? How do I solve this problem? And you could easily give them the answer, give them a solution, but you could also decide not to and create space for them to be able to explore and learn and grow from them trying to figure it out, or giving them space to think through the solution. They might just be feeling blocked. So there are different ways to think about this. And I talk about that second way with leaders all the time, that if you want to build independent, confident team members, and you don't want to be asked to do everything and always bogged down, you need to build their capacity to solve problems and feel confident in their ability to do so. And so you have to then prove to them that they know what to do and give them the chance to have that type of growth mindset and learn what they're capable of. And if you don't give them the space to prove it with you and to validate that, that's not going to happen. So I want to talk through 3 tips that I think about myself all the time. I share with leaders that I coach constantly and have in many of my workshops. And they're the 3, I think, core foundational and most accessible tools to be with somebody or to unlock learning and growth and exploration instead of just jumping into fix it mode. 3 different tips. So the first is to listen. Wow, how revolutionary. However, we all know how to hear, but so few of us actually know how to truly listen. It is one of the most undervalued skills in leadership and in life and in relationship building, especially now in this day and age when our attention span is more limited and we always have something in our hands craving our attention to take us away from what else is happening around us. So what does it mean to listen? It means to be fully present in giving your full attention to somebody else, not just placating it or not just being there. We know the difference when someone is actually with us in a conversation, with us in a moment, with us in a meeting, and truly listening and giving us their attention. Turn off the distractions. Simon Sinek has this brilliant video that I share with leaders all the time about the importance of listening in making people feel heard. And that he holds up his cell phone and he goes, when you are holding this, the people you are with are never going to feel like the most important people in the room with you because you have something else. He goes, it's not enough just to turn it over and put it on the desk because it's still there. You need to turn it over, turn it off or quiet it or whatever, and put it away out of sight. That is a signal to the other person of you matter. You are the most important thing. It also gives yourself the capacity to really actually fully listen. Close the computer, put the phone down. If you're on a call, don't have it on speaker and scrolling, right? Turn the TV off, be with the person. And I know this sounds easy. It's like, oh yeah, duh. But the problem is most of us are really bad at this. I am awful. Like I'm saying this now and I'm like, man, the amount of times that I'm holding my phone or look at my phone when I'm in, moments of conversation with my family or with Carrie, like it is real. And it's not that it's intentional. It's not that you're a bad person. It's just habits. But we want other people to feel heard. We want to be with them. That's one of the first things to do. Create an environment where you can truly listen to the person in front of you and create real, meaningful connection. The second tip is start with curiosity. So as you're listening and it's time to engage or respond or pause, don't immediately jump in with your thoughts, your opinions, your advice, your reactions. Validating the other person is beautiful, but when we start to just tell people what we're thinking and what to do, we're not creating this space, I'll say, for them to feel like what they have shared really truly matters. We're not giving the space for the weight of it. So if we're able to pause and give a question instead, we're inviting them to continue to explore and to share and to know that we care about what they're sharing. So get curious through a question. And one of the best ways, we don't have to know the perfect question, but if someone's talking to you about something difficult or they come to you looking for, with a problem, all you have to do is simply ask the question similar to what came up in that leader's example with his wife, but just asking, is this something that you just want to vent about and talk about? Or do you want to talk about solutions? Are you ready to go into solutions or you just kind of want to talk and I will be here to talk about it with you? You can ask that question because first of all, you're giving them back control to be able to connect to themselves and say, what do I want here? What do I need? So you're giving them agency. You're also setting yourself up for success to meet this person and build connection versus drive disconnection or shut down or make them feel more alone in an already difficult thing. And we often forget this, but it's such a powerful and easily accessible tool to use in any situation or with any relationship in a situation like this. And there's a book called Super Communicators by Charles Duhigg. I'm sure I'm butchering that, but he goes into the power of this question a lot and has a bunch of other incredible tips in there. But that's one I wanted to pull out here. So, and if you ask that question, they continue to share. Of course, curiosity is your best friend. And there's a lot of other types of questions that you can ask. How are they feeling? Right? Asking if you're the manager, how you think that they should approach the situation. And use the listening and your understanding of the person to guide what you think is the right question. Stay away from why questions. I tell leaders all the time. People shut down from those. But what, how, what do you need right now? What feels most hard about this? What do you wish were different? It's endless and it's a muscle too. Curiosity is a muscle. So it's not easy for you to go to a place of curiosity or ask these questions because there also can be uncomfortable. It's very vulnerable to ask these questions to somebody. I understand that. Just know that the more you do it, the better and more comfortable that you get. So just start with one and see where it can take you. The last is acknowledgement. These conversations are not about us, not about you. It's about being with and validating the experience of the other person, especially if they're sharing something difficult and challenging or vulnerable. And one of the best ways to do that is through compassion and taking the time to encourage or share an acknowledgement. And what I mean by acknowledgement, it's similar to a compliment, but you're really trying to get to the heart of the person. In coaching, we learn acknowledgements. And it's specifically called an acknowledgement because it's all about how to point out something unique and specific about that person, who they are, not just something that they do or kind of a throwaway compliment. It's meant to be very intentional. So it can sound something like, something very compassionate to say before getting into acknowledgments could be something like, I don't have the right thing to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me, and I want to support you any way I can. That's actually something Brene Brown talks about when discussing the difference between compassion and empathy. And honestly, like, what a gift, right? It's just say, I recognize your struggle. I also recognize that, like, I don't have anything perfect to say, nor do I want to even try, but I want you to not feel alone in the struggle. Like, that is a gift. And just continuing to validate their experience as well as validate themselves. So this is hard, but you're doing an incredible job navigating it. You sound really confident as you discuss what it is that you want to do. You are doing an incredible job. You are such a compassionate person. You are so brave for navigating this. You are such a great mom, right? Just giving them, because usually when we are in really, really hard situations, we all know that we are our harshest critics. And it's hard to see light when we're surrounded in adversity and darkness. It's hard to see that. But when someone comes to you, they're giving you an opportunity to shine some light on something that they can't see that might help them lessen the load or shift their perspective or give them a bit of hope or a feeling of love and compassion. And that also is a gift. Listening and being with and making them feel heard is a gift we rarely receive. Being met with curiosity for exploration versus shutting down and trying to solve right away is a gift we do not often receive. An acknowledgement and compassionate words from somebody to us to illuminate something we don't see in ourselves is a rare gift we do not often get. But we all need them, especially now more than ever. And these are such accessible tools and skills that you do exercise, but not always intentionally not always in the moments that matter the most. And, you know, I always acknowledge the fact that listening and questions and getting curious and acknowledgement and compassion are not revolutionary things, right? And that you might be thinking like, this is pretty basic. But the problem is that we too often get those basics wrong. And we do so without even realizing it because we are moving so fast and we have our own narratives and agendas in our mind and assumptions without even realizing it. So the more that we can bring intentionality and reminders back to the power of just being human with somebody else and listening and being with and being curious about them and showing them what's special about them, the more that we're able to create an environment in a world that fosters meaningful connection, of feeling less alone when we're so separated, feeling hope when there's so much hopelessness, and we need that now more than ever. And you walking through the world with a little bit more intention and capacity for that, and the willing to show up that way for people, whether for a moment or for an hour or for however long, that makes a really big difference. You can change someone's entire day, their entire outlook, as well as build so much greater trust and deepening the relationships around you. These are not just leadership skills. These are human skills. They are foundational. And also, when you exercise them, you're modeling them to others, to your partners, to your teams, to your children, to your friends, to show you this is what it can feel like, this is what it can look like when I just try to be with and in support of you. So I invite you all to not only reflect and think about moments maybe in the past where you're like, oh, I did a really great job at that, actually. How do I continue to do that more? Or maybe that was a situation when I wish someone would have done that for me. But I also want to invite you to think about, okay, what do I want to put into practice from here? What does it look like to listen more at the dinner table, or when I have that difficult conversation later tonight, or when I am in my one-on-one with the report on my team, or when they inevitably ping me tomorrow with that question, how can I address it differently? What's one acknowledgement I can give to somebody? So just start to think about how can this be applied to you, your day to day? And the more you sit with it and you give yourself the chance to be with these ideas and remind yourself, the more of a chance they're going to be easily accessible to you. Your muscles will grow and you'll have your capacity for this will grow. And I'll just end by saying, let's all try to be more like Pud, more like those loving, compassionate, unconditional loving beings in our life that are just naturally in their essence are just ones to be with us versus ones trying to fix or solve and their own agenda, um, and be a beacon of support or a pillar of support, perhaps, instead of a solver. So go forward, be with, and I want to thank you all so much for joining me again today. And um, we'll talk again soon.